and to celebrate the launch of SeedSmart, the library's seed lending library. The story of SeedSmart starts just across the bridge. The Richmond Public Library started Richmond Grows, one of the first seed libraries in the country, and is a great resource to the almost 200 public libraries that have now followed suit. We heard about Richmond Grows several years ago and loved the idea. The Friends of the Library provided the seed money, quite literally, to start SeedSmart, with donations made in memory of Jean Canepa. We are so thankful to the Friends for the generosity in not only funding this project, but for the many projects they have supported over the last 45 years, representing over $1.5 million in additional funding. Jean Canepa managed the Friends book sale from 2007 to 2012 and served on the Friends board for 8 years. We are indebted to Jean and the many volunteers who give so generously of their time to make a difference at this library. From her grandson, Wes, I learned that Jean loved experimenting with seeds. She would have been delighted to find that she was pretty good at planting ideas too. That Jean was a passionate gardener was the detail that moved us at the library from thinking about a seed library to deciding to launch one. We would not have been able to launch SeedSmart without the help of the many volunteers who helped us source seeds, package, and label envelopes, and advise us on the many decisions that were never part of the Masters in Library Science curriculum. Thanks also to the Living Seed Company and Green Genes Nursery for donating seeds that have helped us boost our initial offerings. The final piece of this story is yet to be told. It lies with the community of avid gardeners and novices alike who, by using SeedSmart, borrowing, growing, harvesting, and sharing seeds, will help it thrive and take it in many wonderful directions that have not yet been explored or even imagined. To some, borrowing may seem like the wrong word. After all, the seeds you take will never be returned. To me, it's a reminder that borrowing carries a deeper meaning. Nothing on this earth can really be owned. Everything is in fact borrowed, passed on, and returned. Everything is part of a constant repeating cycle of nurturing and demise and rebirth. New seeds harvested from plants grown as a result of this program will be returned to the source, and the cycle will begin again. Tonight's program, like the Seed Library, is a bit of an experiment. We've invited a poet, ethnobotanist, water harvester, and seed company entrepreneur to talk about selected plants, each person bringing her own lens to the communal discussion. There will be a short intermission midway through the program and a Q&A after the program. During intermission, we hope you will preview the SeedSmart Library, which is to the right of the library's entrance, which officially launches on April 7th. And if you have your library card, check out one packet of seeds. Thank you to the Mill Valley Library Foundation and the Friends for making tonight's program possible. And now please join me in welcoming Amy Glynn, Apryl Uncapher, Astrid Hoffman, and Jolie Egert, the 4 panelists for tonight's program. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie, and thank you everybody who's come out this evening. It's so heartening to see such a robust audience for this stuff, and we love this place. Mill Valley Library rules. You're going to hear 4 very different voices this evening, but we all kind of come together around one fundamental concept, I think, which is that somewhere, I don't know, between, say, the Roman Empire and Francis Bacon, human beings came under a really bizarre assumption, which was that the universe is an insentient, mechanical thing, and that we were not part of it, that we were somehow separate from the natural world. And I don't know why, really, that has held on for so long, but we find ourselves still grappling with it. So we are kind of interested in talking about how art, science, myth, scripture, engineering, all of these things actually operate on the same fundamental principles. And I'm going to start, we've got our first specimen is probably the most cultivated and one of the most emblematic of wildness in human kind of literary history, at least, the grape. You've all been enjoying it already. The emblem of Pan and Dionysus, and also probably the most fanatically cultivated plant on the planet. So I'm going to read this poem, and then we're going to turn things over to my colleagues here and start a conversation. And I'm going to start actually with a quote from Masanobu Fukuoka, and it is this often quoted one: the ultimate goal of farming is not the growing of crops, but the cultivation and perfection of human beings. That this is European grape. In cultivation, verity, my dears. In breeding, in the blood we find the truth poured forth for all to see, to taste then. From this mud and stone is born the stuff of lore, of myth, the blood of Jove, a sacrament, a sacrifice, a poor substitute enriched by what is meant by it, until the very drone of bees attains a mystical significance, until a structure built of bricks, degrees, and all the chance liaisons between delving roots and subtle clays, the percolating rock-infused particulates of the water table, writes itself. We talk of this as though geology and climate were liturgical, as though a living sermon bloomed in every row of the vineyard. It could be as close to truth as anything ever is, if scripture is an attempt to wring essential meanings from the panoply of earthly possibilities to see pattern. Then what else could one call the manuscript the vines eternally illuminate? Trained supplicants who fall as joyfully to the subjugating rule of order as one might fall into bed after a long day, every molecule humbly subverted so it might be read in the subjunctive case, as if it were. The essence of a thing's a metaphor or symbol, which is why it can endure indefinitely. We pour ourselves into our stories. We imbue all the subjective vagaries of experience with such details as please our sense of purpose. What's most true is the underlying spirit of the thing. We serve the story and vice versa too. We shape each other, co-construe. It's how it works. The ripening fruit has its story too, and into it goes every thought the cultivated ground can possibly conceive of. A profound homily on context and apposite fecundity, the will to re-express time and again how something can transmute itself. To cultivate is worship. Press the issue, all its involute complexities unravel to that one answer. What we put in is what we get back, but in another alphabet. A sublimation of the sun becomes a porphyrin page on which all is written if it's been a good year. But then, these are all good years, n'est-ce pas? Bottoms up then. Cheers.
Well, California is definitely known for its cultivated grape crops. And those cultivated grape crops take a lot of water to manufacture and process. For every gallon of wine produced, generally speaking, 6 gallons or more are gone into making that. For every barrel of wine that you might see inside is about 59 to 60 gallons of wine. And so when you start to look at the multitude of wine barrels at any given winery throughout across the state, you can start to imagine multiplying that by 6 to 20 gallons per every gallon of wine in there. That becomes a lot of processed water. There's actually a strident movement towards using recycled water within wineries. It's not huge, but one I'd really like to focus on is the Jackson family winery. They kind of have a grand label, Kendall Jackson. Many know that label. They, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, began employing some water recycling mixed in with water conservation efforts to reduce their water usage by 70%. And, you know, most of the water that goes into the production of wine is in washing the barrels and tanks. And so here we wash these barrels and tanks, and the water is just taken out to a wastewater facility treatment. What they have done is put in a system where that water is collected and captured and pushed through very small microns and degrees of filters that finally, by the final filter, you're taking out hundreds of microns of particles and then pumping it right back into the system to wash more barrels and tanks. What's really neat about their system is that in the time it takes to catch and clean the water, it does not lose very much heat. So the water actually has to be raised to about 180 degrees to sanitize the tanks and barrels. That takes a lot of energy. So not only can now, when the water goes through, it's maybe at 120 degrees instead of what it has originally started at if they hadn't done this process. They've saved energy and reduced their water by 40% just in this process alone. The other 30% comes from things like water conservation efforts of timing of irrigation, type of irrigation, low flow fixtures throughout the entire winery, native plantings around the facility. These things create what comes out to be 6 million gallons of water saved annually just this winery alone. In 2012, the Wine Institute and the U.S. Tax and Trade Board notes that there are about 3,800 wineries in California and over 8,000 in the U.S., across the U.S. When I look at these numbers, I did some quick calculations, and what I came up with basic math, was if even 5% of those wineries, if 5% is about 300 wineries, I think, but 5% of those wineries attempted to save the same amount of water and attempted to prioritize these same types of water-saving efforts at their winery, we would be talking about over 1 billion gallons of water saved annually through these types of practices. Now imagine this across the entire state of California when we are talking about the agriculture of so many different types of things, not even just grapes. The potential for water savings is mind-blowing, even to myself, who revels in water facts and figures. And so what I really get excited about when I see things like the Jackson Family Winery, what I really get excited about is thinking if we can create a conversation to start this type of prioritization of thinking about how we're going to use our water, we can really create not just a new water culture, but a new water agriculture in California. And that's what really excites me when I think of grapes.
The grape is a fascinating plant for us to discuss. Many of us enjoy it in its many forms, from wine to juice to jam, and of course raisins. With the dawn of agriculture and plant breeding, farmers have developed varieties of fruits and vegetables to suit our needs. The seedless grape has been growing in our country since 1862, under the infamous name of Thompson. With the Thompson has a genetic abnormality that causes the seed to arrest development. Though the flower is pollinated and the ovum fertilized, the seeds stop growing after a few weeks. So the seed is not entirely seedless, rather the seeds are aborted and exist in tiny specks inside the grape. Commercial growers treat the plants with a growth hormone called gibberellin, which is normally secreted by the developing seeds. The flowers are dipped or sprayed with the hormone so that the grapes grow big and juicy despite the arrested seeds. The interesting fact of this is that whether you choose seedless grapes or not, the seeded grapes contain attributes that we normally tend to add to our diet, things like minerals, proteins, and fats, including omega-3s. So this also offers us an open opportunity to ponder our cultivated selves versus our wild nature.
All right, so we're going to move on to our next plant of the evening, which is sugar maple. So we've cultivated grapes to tame the wild out of them. However, sugar maple still remains wild, even as we tap into its nature to yield that yummy maple syrup. And I wanted to talk about what that maple syrup is and where it comes from. So you picture this maple tree, and it has its roots way down in the water table, and it draws the water up its trunk all the way up into its canopy, into its leaves. And those leaves, they take our exhales and our exhaust from our cars and our carbon, and combine it with sunshine, and they make sugar. Right? It's amazing. We learned about photosynthesis in school. That was really boring. This stuff is amazing. So everybody takes some breaths, right? We're breathing in, we're inspiring. Those plants, they make sugar and they give us oxygen. So when we're being inspired by the plants around us, and when we respire and exhale, those plants are taking in that carbon and giving us oxygen and sugar. We are intricately woven in a web of life that is spun in sugar. Sugar is the currency of the universe. We think about cash or gold or whatever. I mean, really, it's sugar. Everything in the universe wants that sugar, and the trees are making it. Okay, so we have this tree. It's got its solar panel leaves out there pumping out this beautiful sweetness, and then it's fall. You can see the trees are starting to lose their leaves a little, and that tree sucks that sugar, that sweetness back inside to store it, and it brings it way, 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 way down into its roots, and that sugar stays there all winter underneath the snow. And then when it's springtime, that sap starts to rise, and that sap is actually last year's sunshine, so it's like a battery bank. And so the tree is using last year's sunshine, and it's drawing it up, and everything around is starting to wake up too, because everything is dependent on this currency of the universe, this sweetness, and so everything's starting to wake up. The maple tree's drawing the sap up, and then all of a sudden, we tap it, and we take that sap and we boil it down and make our maple syrup. So next time you're sitting in front of a plate of pancakes with your maple syrup, I hope that you can take a couple of breaths and remember that you are woven in this web of life that is spun with such sweetness, and feel that. And then enjoy the pancakes.
Well, I have two little ones, and I can say maple syrup is treasured at our house. And we love to talk about how trees are tapped and the sap is boiled down into syrup, but I really want to relay some of that story too. For me, the part that really excites me when I think of maple trees, as much as I love maple syrup, is going off a little bit of the phenomenon Jolie was talking about, the ability of a tree to move water great heights. Now, because I work with water, I work with pumps a lot. And there's a lot of limitations to pumps. You have things like your static head, how high that water can be pumped, and friction head, how far it can be pumped. And when you look at a tree, we have our infamous redwoods all around us, so glorious in their height. How does that tree get water from its roots all the way up there to its leaves? It's quite a phenomenon. Well, just as trees are pumping and pulling water from the roots to the leaves, so we have to do that in our water treatment systems. We have a place that we're starting from and a place it's going to that we have to get it to. So that's either from the river to the treatment system or from the treatment system to a home. But either way, in that movement, 80% of a treatment facility's energy use goes into that pumping. And not only does 80% of that energy use of an entire utility system, wastewater treatment plant's energy go to pumping, but energy cost is their second highest budget item. So they're really looking for ways to make their pumps and pumping systems efficient. So I'm seeing updates in the way impellers are put into pumps, or lubricated in ways to run easier and faster, or possibly new design standards on how you might have a thickness of a pipe or a length run to reduce the friction head. But what would it be like if we looked to a tree for inspiration? Well, back in the late 90s, there was this fabulous woman who has inspired me. I caught her my first year at Bioneers, which would have been 2000. Her name's Janine Benyas, and she coined the phrase biomimicry. Biomimicry is essentially mimicking biology, right? We're going to observe nature and try to do what nature does. And so in that process, I get excited to look at a tree and say, well, how does a tree do that, you know? And there's a lot of scientists looking at that, looking at how when a leaf begins to evaporate, as it releases the water into the air through evaporation, it starts a suction process. How the water molecules, all the way down through the xylem to the roots, how their bond is so strong through hydrogen bonds, what that is about. What are the variables that increase root pressure to help push the water up? You know, a tree can only go as high as this water phenomenon is happening, but when you look at trees like the redwoods, or even eucalyptus that have been even noted higher than some redwoods in California and Australia, there's something really special happening there. I don't know the answer to it, but I am really excited when I read articles about what's happening in that science and study. And so when I think about trees, when I think about a maple tree, I kind of get a little light going in my heart about what the future holds based upon what kind of advances will happen as we keep learning, and scientists really learn by observing nature and not just making and maximizing efficiency of designs that already exist.
Okay, Apryl and Jolie just dignified my poem in a really important way. This is really cool because both of my co-panelists here have been talking about the sort of excitingly, endless regeneration that trees sort of represent for us. My maple poem is an elegy for someone who died at a very young age, and rather than focusing on that capillary action and all of that, root to leaf and sun and sap and everything, I remembered at one point in my youth having someone, I was looking at a maple tree and it was in its full fall kind of, flaming splendor, and I said something about how does it get those colors, that shade of red is unbelievable, and the person said, no, the leaves are always red, it's covered up by chlorophyll. And I said, what? They don't, and they're like, yeah, they just don't need the chlorophyll anymore, so they shed it, and that's the underlying color. And I just found that completely bizarre and fascinating. But anyway, I'll leave it there and read the poem. This is Sugar Maple. There was a day I saw you through the window of the coffee shop as you blew down the sidewalk. In a snow of hassled pages, I jumped up to go and threw some coins down on the tabletop and rushed into the street to watch your flight along it till you turned the corner, dropped away, and you were lost to view against the ruddy late daylight, and that was all. When I was young, we had a sugar maple in our yard, a giant, and we had this game when late October weekends came to blow the leaves down. They were hard to catch, hand-shaped, and curled a sudden age after a green life. They'd bombard the lawn in vivid torrents or be flung on random gusts. Impossible to gauge their fall. You'd chase them, craning as they flew like inverse parachutes, and you stared up until the sky solidified like lacquer, and the next you knew, you'd fallen breathless, leafless. When you did trap one, you'd often crush it in the act because no sap was left. Death dried, bone porous, there'd be nothing left intact except the veins, a carmine grid where death first showed, from which it bled unchecked until the whole was scarlet stained with fever and no longer of the world but shiny with delirium, wind hurled, like you, a fragile body that attained its utmost brilliance and its death and fall, without volition, unrestrained and beautiful in flight, but wrecked, grappled with. And that was all. I'm still on. Our next species is heartsease, viola tricolor, known by many names, including Johnny Jump Up and pansy and all kinds of things. This is the where'd it go? This is the plant that is referred to in Midsummer Night's Dream when Oberon and Titania and all of the fairies are working their mischief upon the unsuspecting. And there's this essence of heartsease that is said to be a love charm. If you drip it into the eyes of a sleeping person, they will just fall in love with the next thing they look at. And anyone who's read the play or seen it knows what happens next. But anyway, I thought heartsease was a funny word for a plant that did that. So that's sort of where this came from. Heartsease. Oberon claimed that essence of heartsease would make a man or woman madly dote upon the next live creature that it sees when dripped into the eyes. Yes, we devote ourselves blindly to love. We all have been hoodwinked, beguiled. We are out of our senses with being too much in them. Ease. Just when does this get easy? Cast all self-defenses off, see how at ease you feel. Cockeyed and heedless, passionate fascination is possession, essence of being completely beside yourself. Ease. Look to the other names it has. Pansy, for thought's persistence. Love lies bleeding, and kiss me quick. No ease in want, in needing.
So now that we've learned how plants make sugar from sunshine, we're going to advance into how plants have sex. So plants can't walk over to another plant and say, hey, baby, let's get it on, because they're rooted in the ground, because we talked about how they need to bring that water up to their leaves. And so they have to employ other means. And they usually rely on pollinators like insects or birds, sometimes they're bats. In this case, they're insects for heartsease. So plants lure in the pollinators with a pretty petal dress. You see, they primp up for the party. It's not much different than us, really. And violets, they produce a lot of nectar. So nectar's it's sugar water, right? It's that currency of the universe that they're basically bribing the pollinators to do their dirty work. Well, that's not really a great word, to do their deed for them. And so the pollinators get paid in sugar. So in this big violet patch, there's nectar and violet perfume wafting in the air and calling in the pollinators to come make violet love. Now, once that happens, the other animals who feed on the pollinators, they come in too. And they join the festivities like birds. They'll come in to eat those insects. Well, then other animals come in which feed on the birds. So these other animals might be raptors or foxes or coyotes, and they also join in the big violet nectar party. So Violet puts a lot of energy into creating this nectar and its pretty dress. And it's really expensive, actually. And you might think, well, this is just the way it is, that Violet has got to do this because that's what it takes to reproduce. But that's not really the case for Violet because she has a plan B. So can we have the next slide, please? Okay, so these are these underground secret asexual flowers that Violet has. They can pollinate themselves. Who Who knew, right? And they're basically clones. They'll create clones. They don't have any genetic variation, but they do produce fruits and seeds. So can we have the next slide, please? So this is a asexual fruit with the seeds inside. Now there's been rumors that fairies take these seeds and string them up and make little necklaces to adorn themselves, but I think it's just a rumor. No,
My department, right?
yeah, so basically, Violet can do it both ways, right? She doesn't have to go to this major expense of making this elaborate, expensive gala spring bloom party. But I honestly think that Violet, she just really likes to party. So.
Girl likes to look good.
Yeah, she likes to party. What's next?
The heartsease is such a generous host to the insect kingdom, as she does not need to create her own pollen to reproduce herself. As Jolie just said, she still does, offering an elixir of life to all the pollinators. As many of us know, pollinators are the party of every garden. They fly in and enjoy the nectar while helping our plant allies reproduce and spread their seeds. Without some of our pollinators, our diet would be reduced to a very simple or minimized version of what we know it today. Creating a garden with plants that are rich in pollen and nectar specifically to feed our pollinators is one of the easiest and most powerful things that we can do to support our local honeybee and monarch populations. This old world flower, heartsease, self-seeds generously and gives herself. Plant wildflower seeds in the winter and help spread the joy in your garden and share it with some of your insect neighbors. Have your heart at ease.
Well, for me, when I think of a pansy or the heartsease, I think of edible flowers, and I picture my little ones just picking them and eating them like you wouldn't imagine. There is some fascination with being able to be out in nature and finding something that you can graze upon right then and there and enjoy it. And being so lucky to live on Mount Tam. Just now, just within the past week, we've been hiking and picking wild spring onions and minor lettuce and finding just the starts of Douglas fir tips coming out that we can kind of nibble on as we hike. And there's just such an endearing relationship that is cultivated, I see in my children already, by getting to know what grows here. And so when I think of these edible varieties, Jolie, I don't believe this one is native to us, correct? It's a European plant. So this one is not native for us, but there are many, many varieties. But what I think of is being able to, we've been starting to cultivate native species into our yard. So what is that to take the wild back into our homescape? There really is this separation. I'm so grateful to John Muir for preserving the massive amount of parkland we have. And at the time, it was really, really necessary, but it was also a turning point in our perception of nature, or at least this is my opinion, as a turning point of our perception of nature, because here we are, somewhat separate from it. Let's go hike out in nature today. But yet we live in it all around us, and so in our yards, with this seemingly unconscious disconnect, we'll plant anything we want in our yards. The EPA says that 1/3 of our residential water use is used outside for outdoor, lawn and gardens. That nationwide, that adds up to 9 billion gallons of water per day. I almost can't even believe that that's true, but that's on the EPA website, so we'll just hope that they're saying a truthful statement there. And, because I don't always agree with you. But that's a lot of water, and also in that kind of landscape, it's a lot of maintenance. And I don't know about you, I do not have a lot of time, and I don't have a lot of money to spend on water, just taking care of lots of plants. And so here's this really interesting idea. Imagine what your yard would look like if you started pulling in a little bit of bracken fern fronds. Sword fern is the most common if you go to even any of our local nurseries. What if you pulled bracken fern instead, and then when those baby ferns are couple weeks ago with some fabulous onions and vegetables and fish, and it was just so wonderful and special to eat some food that came right from our yard that is natively grown here. What that does is, although we all love our major nutrients like greens and beans, when we begin to cultivate micronutrients in our diet that are specific to the environment we live in, it creates a wider pantry, per se, within our body to become, to have the ability to overcome any type of environmental stresses you might have on you. The more diversity there is in a system, whether it's inside your body, whether it's inside your landscape, you become more resilient to the environmental stresses around you. That is what's really exciting to me about bringing the wild back into our homescape. It reduces our water footprint. It increases pollinators' ability to reconnect, our ability to reconnect, and to create a long-lasting health for ourselves.
Thank you, you guys. This is really a lot of fun, and I love that as a wind-down notion before we take our intermission. We are seamlessly intertwined with nature when you're literally ingesting the fruit of your labors. It's a really potent reminder of that. My kids are massive foragers as well, and we have a lot of fun with that kind of stuff, and sometimes it's the only green thing that they'll eat in a given day. I have to find miner's lettuce or it's over. But we're going to take a few minutes, and then we will declaim on a couple of other characters, and in the meantime, you guys feel free to enjoy the seed library and wine.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, we've got a little bit of feedback that the sound is not consistent, and some people are having a little bit of trouble hearing, so if that's you and that's happening to you, put a finger up or something so we know, okay? Round two. We're going to go, we started the first section with the plant that is emblematic of Dionysus, and we're going to start this one with the plant that represents Apollo. The sort of artistic dichotomy of chaos and order, or as we would look at it here, cultivation and wilderness. This is the sunflower, and I'm just going to quickly say, in case anyone's not familiar with it, there's a reference in this poem to an old poem of William Blake's, where sunflower, weary of time, and, I thought, what does an English guy know about a sunflower anyway? It rains all the time. So I kind of, being like a young whippet, I thought I'd just take on Blake. But anyway, that's what I'm referring to if that line comes up. The other thing is that the sunflower, and you can see hopefully in some of these pictures, but if not, you've probably looked at them. The seeds have a very characteristic spiral pattern that is a representation of the golden mean or the golden ratio. It's the Fibonacci series, and it's represented in math by the Greek letter phi. So this is sunflower. Irrational you may be in the way that mathematicians mean it, but you're all about efficiencies, optimizations. From apex to primordia, you spiral into control. Girasole, you flower of the golden mean, the gyre, the twist, the curve. Triumph of coincidence, master of packing density, attentiveness to detail. And all this from a flower no one planted, arisen from last year's spillage from the birdhouse, 2,000 seeds for the one that engendered you. Weary of time? I think not. Object lesson for adepts of the trigonometries of Fibonacci. You are time, a living sundial, tireless tracker of the light's trajectory. You know, you flaming thing, you august standard bearer for the skies in their last and greatest clarity before the cloudy season. You know there is nothing random in the way a space is filled.
Nothing ever doesn't make sense. We can do the math. Each thing will always be the sum of things that came before it. Write this message in the borders of the garden. Phi, the symbol of the mean you mean, the disc atop the slim stalk. Yes, and phi, by the way, on any and all who'd call you weary of time, who'd wrongly reify those bending rays, that reverent chin-to-chest kowtow. You know of mortal gravity, sun worshipper, you Pythia of pith and oil, you oracle of harmony, order, and reason. Of course you bow to it.
When summer is at its peak, it's not uncommon to see rows and rows of sunflowers blooming in all of their colorful glory. Ranging from just 1 foot to up to 15 feet tall, sunflowers come in a variety of colors, from yellow to orange to red and everything in between. In addition to being amazing fabric dyers for yellow and orange, the sunflower also offers her generosity in oil, nuts, seeds, and butter. Sunflowers naturally attract wildlife and provide food for birds in the fall, while they casually reseed themselves. The sunflower originated in Central and South America and migrated north, likely with the Spanish conquistadors. Remains of the sunflower date back 4,600 years from Mexico. Sunflowers are often associated with truth, loyalty, and honesty. The sunflower is also associated with fertility, thanks to its connection to the sun. To bring about conception, eat sunflower seeds or take a ritual bath with sunflower petals. And speaking of fertility, I'm going to read a little prose from The Secret Teachings of Plants. Semen is Latin for a dormant, fertilized plant ovum, a seed. Men's ejaculate is chemically more akin to plant pollen. See, it is really more accurate to call it mammal pollen. To call it semen is to thrust an insanity deep inside our culture, that men plow women and plant their seed, when in fact, what they are doing is pollinating a flower.
It's hard to follow that one. All right, sunflowers, they're in the Asteraceae family. That's their scientific family name. And this is a really highly evolved and ingenious group of plants. This is the family of the daisy and the dandelion, the artichokes and the asters, the calendula and the chamomile. What appears to be one flower is actually many, many flowers masquerading as one blossom. So can we have the next slide, please? So if you look at this picture, you see all those star-shaped things in the middle of the quote-unquote flower? All those star-shaped things are their own individual flower, as well as all of the petals, quote-unquote petals, around the edges are their own flowers too. So each one of these tiny flowers has its own reproductive organs, it performs nookie, and it produces its own fruit. I'm having a hard time getting the right thing on the microphone here. In this case, the fruit is an individual sunflower seed. So each one of these flowers has sex and makes its own little fruit. So combining the forces of many tiny little flowers into one big flower head is really advantageous in the marketing department. This way, the pollinators can spot the heads at a big distance. And the pollinators then hit a jackpot because they get the pollen and nectar of many flowers in one. So it's pretty ingenious. Sunflowers can give us hope for community and an example of how we can all cooperate for the good of all. They're also cooperating to heal our abused landscapes. Sunflowers are, who knew, but really amazing at picking up radioactive isotopes, and that they've been planted in the Ukraine to help with the disaster of Chernobyl in the late 80s. So, and now they're looking to the sunflower to heal the wounds of Fukushima. And in fact, these plants are so good at uptaking radioactivity that they have to be, when they're cut, they have to be put in a nuclear waste dump. So the sunflower is often used as a symbol of the anti-nuclear movement. So can I have the next slide, please? So this is an example of that. So when I gaze at the, when I gaze at the sunflower growing towards the sun, I'm always reminded of how nature models cooperation and mutual benefit. Perhaps this kind of community-mindedness and cooperation can heal our internal as well as our external landscapes. And I hope you guys, when you look at the sunflower next, you feel hopeful. Thank you.
So, yeah. Our next character, I think here we go. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with this bad boy, but see, everyone just went, ah. There's something really weird about this plant. I don't know, it's magical, and I'm not exactly sure why, but I remember being a very small kid. My grandparents had retired to Southern Oregon and had a large parcel of uncultivated wilderness that their house was on. And we used to go gold panning in one of the creeks. And, if we were ever there at a time when there was trillium blooming, my grandfather would just stop and practically bow down in front of this plant. And I just knew that there was something really important going on, but I could never figure out what. So when we were talking before the panel, we realized that everyone had some kind of similar experience. There's something about the ephemerality of this beautiful little wildflower that just kind of switches people on, and it's the kind of almost mystical thing. Anyway, my trillium poem is a little oblique, and it's really about gold panning, but you'll see the connection, hopefully. This is trillium. Quaint. You couldn't call a thing so stark and so hard-bitten quaint. The certainty extinction is, dear permanence, might make loving it easy, but that's not to say tending it is. These acres were a town once, gone these 150 years to empty frames, a case that once held bullets, fossilized ruts where wagons split the dun waving seas of grass, to spring ephemerals, the trillium's mud-bound root writing its slow hieroglyphics, messages in tongues even the old no longer speak. Only the river knows how, and the river is spoken to with dredges, pickaxe, sluice box, shallow pans, slowly sieve the mid-spring mud because that's what it knows. In spring, the river has 1 trillion words for time and loss and secrets, which seems right, even if it's that abundance that makes things tough to get at. But there are 2 ways to reach the deepest truth of something: marriage, divorce. Combining things to see just how they strike each other, or dividing them in order to divine the smallest pure part. On this bank, it's granite that goes first, then oil shale. Then the clay has to be slowly broken down by hand, gravel scraped out, scrapped. Then once you get clear water again, you look for the precise angle at which the pale sand will wash over the pan's rim on the swift sweep of the current. All is ephemera, and what you lose, although it seems at first like everything, is only what you need to lose to see things clearly. In the end, silt films the bottom of the pan, night sky in microcosm, clear black, pyrite starred. Start over. And show me one important thing someone can reach without there being first some simulacrum of the thing he wants presented falsely as the thing itself, to sway him from the work he has to do. If something seems too easy, probably it is. The point, and you can take this to the bank, trust me, is process, being here. There's nothing else. Assign such value as you will to it. There's scarcely anything left anyway. Flecks you can barely see. There are veins under the mud. You must look closely. It is work. But otherwise, they're only an idea. Just the spark of an idea. Blink and you'll miss it. It will have gone on downstream, or maybe we'll have let it escape collapse, Gold-centered, bright white trinity of petals lapsing back to the mud. The flowering is brief, a glint, then gone maybe for decades. Call it what you like. Not everyone has got a rich enough language to call things what they are. But take your sluice and your spade to the storm-whirled river, go just after rain. Go in the plant they call wake robin, trinity plant, birth root, lifts itself from the mud. And dig deep, friend, and then you tell me, what is alchemy if this is not?
So as Amy mentioned, the flowering time for Trillium is brief. This plant only blooms for a couple of weeks a year, and I know that there's some blooming right now in Deer Park, so up in Fairfax, so if you want to see them, now is the time to go there and eat some of the first flowers that bloom in the spring. They bloom in the shady, cool, forested areas. There's probably a bunch down here in Mill Valley that I don't live here. This plant, as Amy also said, is called True Love, Birth Root, Birthwort, Wake Robin, and it is associated with the spring because it's said to wake the robins into song. I love that. Not only are the flowers short-lived, but research shows that plants have to be about 15 years old before they'll even produce a flower. So one plant generally produces just one flower a year. So this plant has got to be over 15 years old. It's like that big. You'd never know it by looking at it. You just never know it. It's amazing what we don't know, what we don't see around us. So, and these plants are incredibly slow growing. The same researcher who researched the age of blooming also found that one plant that was 72 years old had a rhizome, which is the underground stem, a rhizome that was about 1 inch in diameter and 2.5 inches long. 72 years old. Think about a tree that's 72 years old. It's a lot bigger than that. And that's when the flowers die back in the fall. It just everything, all of that sugar goes back into that rhizome in the winter and hangs out there, waits till the spring. There are about 38 species of Trillium throughout North America. There's only about 40 in the world, so this plant is truly a North American plant. And it has a rich history as a medicine among Native American tribes. And the rhizomes are the medicinal part, and they're astringent, they're antispasmodic, and they tone the uterus, so they're especially suited to helping with hemorrhaging after birth, hence the birthwort and the birth root. And my understanding is that the symbol for midwives around native California was actually the Trillium flower. That indicated that somebody was a midwife. So there's always the question of how did these ancient people acquire the knowledge of healing plants? You know, was it just that indigenous people employed trial and error over thousands of years and people died along the way trying plants that were poisonous? It's one way of thinking about it. But I'm going to go out on a limb because it's Marin, and I'm going to say that sometimes the plants just tell us their medicine. At least they do to me. So at Go Wild Institute, which I run, we often have classes that we do plant journeys. So people take a tiny little bit of a plant and we sit for 20 minutes in meditation, and then we come back together and we say what this plant told us or showed us. We did a Trillium journey, and a good number of people had images or got information about this plant being used to facilitate birth, being physical or metaphorical. And the majority of these people had no idea that this plant was called birthwort. We didn't talk about that. We just sort of went in blind. So it was just amazing to me. I was very blown away by this plant, and there's a lot that it has to teach me. And I'm continually blown away by what a plant can tell us if we just sit and listen quietly to them. And I would encourage us all to do that, because that's the secret of learning the wisdom of the earth, getting quiet and listening to nature. So I hope you guys get a chance to get out there and see the Trilliums and have a little conversation with them this spring. Thank you.
Ants are an important part to Trillium sexual reproduction. The seeds are covered with a lovely ant food, So the ants take the fruits and bury them and eat them. And the seeds that remain germinate the following spring. After licking off all the nutritious oil, worker ants deposit trillium seeds in their colony trash pile, which often ends up resulting as an excellent place for germinating seeds. All the while, the seed patiently waits, breathing and waiting for the perfect moment to germinate. It takes a couple of years for that germinating seed to sprout above ground. 7 to 10 years after that seed is in the ground, the plant will produce a white flower. Trilliums are perennials, which means that they will produce their beauty year after year. Trilliums only reproduce from sprouted seeds, never vegetatively. So the seed cycle is essential to the survival of the species. Trillium represents modesty, or modest ambition, which is just a humble representation of the process it takes for her to reproduce.
I think the part that, there are so many inspiring elements about Trillium, but the part that I'd really like to speak about tonight is the part that is underground. It is a rhizome, which means that it's a continuously growing stem underground with lateral offshoots that just shoot off and start to connect with those that are around it. So traditionally, a rhizomaceous plant will be in a colony of plants, and that community is networked underground through these offshoots from the underground stem. What's really neat about that is, let's say this trillium over here had a bunch of erosion and its roots are exposed to the elements, exposed to environmental stresses that other parts of its community are not. There's a greater chance that it will actually continue surviving because of this support of community, this supported network that's happening underground. Now, we talked about biomimicry earlier. I'd like to apply this type of thinking, this type of looking at nature's examples of strength and survival and resiliency, and apply it to rainwater harvesting. Let's say, I don't know if all of you own a home or how big your roofs are, but imagine that your roof is 1,000 square feet. It's not huge. For every inch of rain that falls on that roof, you can harvest 620 gallons of water during that 1 inch of rainfall. Now, imagine each of you in here decided, I'm going to capture 1,000 square feet of my roof space, and I'm gonna put in a 600-gallon tank. It may not seem like that much when you're just looking at the one 500-gallon tank in your yard, or if you're looking at the 1 trillium. But what's really happening is, if each of you as neighbors in this watershed that Mill Valley sits in were to do that, it makes a great impact. Now, I don't have local numbers for you, so I'm going to use a quick example that extends beyond our community into Washington, where they have a program called RainWise. Since 2011, they have engaged 350 projects that have totaled, so these projects might be rain barrels, might be rain gardens, might have different elements of water harvesting. But out of these 350 projects, they have recorded, 450,000 square feet of roof space. Now, that averages out to about 1,300 square feet per roof. It's not too bad. 450,000 square feet of roof space over 350 homes. 1 inch of rain falling, 1 inch, which we know they get a lot more than that. And they are harvesting over a quarter million gallons of water, 279,000 to be exact per my math. Over a 250,000 gallons of water per 1 inch of rain that they are contributing to saving, and maybe saving for later use to water their yard, or keeping off from, another component is a lot of that runoff would hit the streams and create erosion. Now let's come back to Mill Valley really quick. So we see that as a community, if we network together small-scale decentralized systems, I can tell you from nature's examples, these are the ways we deal with environmental stressors in a resilient, long-lasting, impactful way. So I ask you this. I looked at the stats for Mill Valley population, and in 2012, it was, oh my goodness, I really apologize. Somehow I looked it up and didn't write it down, and I'm embarrassed. But I want to say 30,000 people. It's over 30,000 people. Dividing that by 4, we still get, unfortunately I didn't write these down, but if you could quickly do 30,000 divided by 4, we'd have quite a few households. I am telling you, could there be 350 households in Mill Valley willing to capture 1,000 square foot of their roof space during storm events? If 350 households in Mill Valley alone, which there's over 1,000 households easily, I don't know the numbers, but easily over 1,000 by those stats of numbers of people, we could be collecting just in our little watershed over 250,000 gallons of water per inch of rain that falls. And in our community, we get about 22 inches a year. This begins to make a sizable impact on the amount of water that we're using outside, on the amount of water we're keeping from hitting our riverways. So maybe we might not have so much flooding down when we're getting on the highway over there by Tam Junction. Some of that's sea level rising, but some of it's runoff too. And so I think we could get 350 people or more if we could understand the impact that one little rain barrel really does make a difference.
So we're going to move to our last plant of the evening, chamise. So if this plant had a motto, it would say, "Spark it up." And we'll talk about why. So this is an evergreen shrub, and chamise brushlands cover about 7 million acres in California. This is a major plant in California. And chamise is found throughout the Bay Area on hot, dry, south-facing slopes, and we can see that on Mount Tam. It is highly, highly adapted to fire, and it might be considered the pyromaniac of the plant world. It contains an oily substance that actually adds fuel to the fire to make it burn faster and hotter. However, fire has an important role in our ecosystem. It renews, it regenerates, it recycles. Fire returns nutrients to the soil. In chaparral habitat, where chamise grows, natural fires occur every 10 to 40 years, and stands over 50 years are really rare where fire is not suppressed. So in the wild, where you allow fire to move naturally through the landscape, you're not going to find over a 50-year-old chamise plant, because they burn. So to me, chamise begs the question, what is the natural role of fire in our ecosystem, in our landscape? Native peoples of California were skilled and knowledgeable land managers. They didn't just walk around and pick things and say, ooh, that's good, that's good. They managed the landscape on a really large level, and they used fire to do this. For instance, acorns were a staple food for most Native Californians. Most Native Californians ate almost a pound of acorns a day. It was a staple food, like our wheat. So the Native Californians burned oaklands to kill off the faster-growing bay trees and the Doug fir trees. Those trees go faster than oaks. They overtop the oaks, and what happens when you block the sunlight from a tree? It dies. It doesn't get any sweetness. So those bay trees and those Doug fir needed to be weeded out, and the Native people would weed it out with fire. And now we have a lot more bay trees than we used to 1,000 years ago, and the bay trees are actually one of the major vectors killing the oaks with sudden oak death. So when we look at our hillside, what is the natural state? It's a question, you know. So we've removed fire from our ecosystem, which has changed the composition of our plant communities. Fire suppression has created a huge, huge fuel load that if allowed to burn now, we'd have these hot, catastrophic, very unnatural fires that could be quite dangerous considering we have lots of populations on the urban-wildlife interface, especially in Marin. Land management agencies like the East Bay Regional Parks and the Marin Municipal Water District are looking at using herbicides in our watersheds to get rid of some of these fuels, like broom. Ironically, however, some studies show that burning the broom could actually reduce these populations. So it's a really complex ecological issue, and I am not going to sit up here and say I have any answers and that all of our land managers are not doing a good job. It's just a very, very complex issue, and I think that we as a society need to address the big, old, burning question about what is the proper role of fire in our landscapes. So I will end with a quote from Gordy Slack from an article in Bay Nature. He says, "More than 50 years ago, the late California Academy of Sciences botanist John Thomas Howell, who wrote The Flora of Marin, who's an amazing botanist, he came upon wildflowers blooming in the charred remains of a chaparral wildfire on the side of Mount Tamalpais. He had never seen a display to match it. It's a wonder," he wrote, "that ecologists don't become arsonists in order to behold the beauty after the burns."
Since chamise seed germinates at high rates only after fire, seedling recruitment and population expansion are fire dependent. This ever-present, drought-tolerant plant clearly has a fascinating relationship with fire. Like many chaparral plants, chamise seeds require fire to germinate. This ensures that seedlings will be able to take advantage of the temporary nutrients in the soil and open sunlight that help the plant's early stages. Modern humans have a natural adversity to wildfires. Unlike our ancestors that properly worked with the element to not only manage and maintain wildland, but to also bring life, fertilization, diminish weeds, and promote growth. Life always rises above the ashes, and chamise has been demonstrating that for thousands of years. There is so much for us to take from that.
Chamise is predominantly in our chaparral region, which is very dry. And when I think of the chaparral parts of our mountain, they're not my first pick I'd pick to live. And historically, I think most indigenous people, yes, they have lived in all sorts of deserts and drylands, but might not be the most greatly populated. And then modern times come. And gosh, we can just live anywhere because we'll reroute the resources we need. Let me rephrase that. We will reroute the resources we want anywhere we want them. And hence Las Vegas happens. And it's a phenomenon to me. And so as these cultures have kind of come up and we get wise to that water, clean water is a limited resource and one that is essential to our life. We've had some communities of regulators come forth and say, hey, people who live here are going to mandate xeriscaping. Xeriscaping is a type of landscape where you use zero irrigation, and so oftentimes you have beautiful yards of gravel. And they actually really are beautiful, and there's some plants that grow there, very few. But here's the funny thing about it. Okay. Turn on your faucet, the EPA says, even if you're living out in a dry land, you're still the average family that's probably using about 100 gallons of water per day per person, 80 to 100 gallons, we'll make it 100 to be easy. And in that space, you turn on your faucet and you're showering and flushing toilets and doing laundry and all the things we need to do, or love to do. And that water has come to us. Most of us don't even know from where. We use it, and it immediately leaves our home and goes to a wastewater treatment facility now. That's great. That's what's happening in most homes, especially in drylands. But what if that water comes into our faucet, and before we let it leave, don't let it leave, we capture it and take it out into the landscape. Now, let's say we do that with our laundry and shower water. This is what we would traditionally call gray water. Gray water is wonderful, you know, what the nutrients that we look at as bad for us, don't drink your gray water, right? Those nutrients are actually vitamins for the plants. Put it out in your yard for orchard trees and native plantings around your property, and all of a sudden a lot of cool stuff starts to happen. You can strategically plant plants that are producing food for you, for the animals. You can grow trees near your house, and it creates shade structure in a few years and reduces your energy cooling consumption. Anything that's left over, capture it into your land, sink it straight down to groundwater, let it be filtered through nature's fabulous soil filtration system that we just simply can't beat. And all of that reduces the amount of water. Not only did it have all those benefits for you, you're additionally reducing the amount of water that was heading out to that wastewater treatment facility. And what do we say about that? It takes a lot of energy to pump that water from your house all the way out to the water treatment facility. So there's just a host of fabulous things happening. And when I was working professionally a decade ago on some of these issues, I would find it fascinating that my mentor would take, you know, walk me with him as we would handhold regulators through this process, because it was a little scary to say, I'm going to use this water in my landscape. And we would show them examples, and it would turn out great. And it was fabulous to have this home that was thriving with all of these wonderful benefits and not using any potable water whatsoever to create this oasis. In that, I feel really inspired. And so I was talking to a gentleman, and I want to offer one quick example, which is in Tucson, Arizona. They've done some curb cuts and street wells. And so the water that used to come down off of the street and gather those pollutants and hit into a storm drain and go straight out to a river, instead, once you cut into those curbs, the water is coming down, enters the tree well, and is now replanted with an edible medicinal plant. In this particular example in Tucson, Arizona, that was done by Brad Lancaster, they planted mesquite. And in that, this wonderful thing started happening. All of those great attributes I told you about, shade, finding out 10 degrees cooler under those shade trees that were growing now mature 5 to 10 years later. Mesquite pods. In the mesquite pods, neighbors would come together. They invested, this community group invested in a bicycle grinding mill that they would bicycle to the part where the neighborhood that day, on harvesting day, they could come out to their house. I would walk out of my house, there's my tree well, and there's my mesquite tree, and I'm collecting my pods, and I'm gonna grind them down into this flour. And it was really neat, because here becomes a street well that we don't think much about all throughout San Francisco. I lived there for a decade and would see these with aesthetically pretty plants, but not anything necessarily usable. And here this community transformed its landscape into something that became a food production for their community, and yet also created this host of other benefits. And so this idea of, you know, we're never going to just not live in the dry lands and deserts. We're not going to take the houses away. But how do we maximize our lifestyle in a way that really takes into a conscious effort what's really happening around us with all other life? And so when I think of dry lands, it may seem inhospitable, but I look at so many fabulous examples of where even in the driest areas we can live pretty sensibly and in relationship with that environment and not be resource intensive.
All right, folks, you have been a fascinating and fabulous audience, and thank you so much. We who write know actually that it's an endurance event to take in this much information, and I think I speak for everybody when I say we are incredibly grateful to have a large and engaged audience of really bright and switched on folks, so this has really been a pleasure. I'm going to end with my treatise on the chamise. This is going to take us back away from the water and back to the fire. And has nothing to do with the acrimonious ending of a relationship, I assure you. Okay. We will be available for Q&A should anyone have any cues for us to A when this is done, and otherwise, thank you and good night. So this is chamise. There is no wind. The chaparral has gone to decadence, and the sun at such a height leaves the sky desiccated, bleached ash white, a concentrated brightness, an indrawn gathering of the light, as if the whole world were enclosed within a camera obscura, an inverted replica universe sinisured through a pinhole. Even the soil is aching from the heat, a cracking bed of serpentine where few species contrive to grow, and those that do sustain themselves on nothing but complete famine and drought. More than sustain. They flout the whole system, responding to the mean conditions with a kind of libertine excess, oiling themselves elaborately without a care for consequence, inviting fire, anointing their dry leaves with aromatic resins just to inspire a dramatic response. Spontaneous combustion. Dire repercussions, but they've thought of that too, developing at once two kinds of seed. One sprouts in wet soil, one is only freed if the achene is scorched. This habitat requires certain adaptations. And, rather than being meager in return for meagerness, why not agree to burn? Say there is nothing you cannot withstand. Thank you.
If you have a question, could you come up to my left and ask it at the microphone?
Good question. What are the regulatory issues around putting gray water collection systems in a residential home here in the Valley or anywhere in Marin?
Most of the Bay Area has really gotten up to speed because it's just the way to go, so they really want to encourage it. And I want to say all good things about Marin, so I don't know, but I'm more familiar with the East Bay and San Francisco being super, like, I will give you incentives to do it. I'm not sure that, I don't know if Marin is that hip yet, but they definitely would encourage it for sure. I just don't know if there's incentives.
Tax breaks for the installation, like solar or things like that?
Not quite, but you know, more rainwater harvesting rebates, making it cheaper to get a rain barrel, or to put in native plants that aren't going to use additional irrigation. In terms of the gray water, I just don't think in Marin, and I really wish I had looked that up, but San Francisco has been most of my more current work.
Thanks.
Hello. I started to notice that I've had a home here in Mill Valley for 30 years, and basically there's an underground river going right underneath my property, which is now in Coburg. And I started realizing that's a whole heck of a lot of water that's going by, and I'm not using it. But I'm confused because I don't know how to get that water, first of all, stored so that it's not icky in 6 months, and how to get it through my irrigation system. So I was wondering if there's like people that are like reading this or educating themselves on using this groundwater or roof water to store it and to recycle it. I don't even know how to recycle it.
Well, there's a lot of great questions there, and I'm not. Here's what I would say. You're talking about underground water, correct? So you want to tap it. You would have to pump it up. You would have to pump it up into a tank. you know, roof water doesn't really need a lot of filtering. I mean, you usually have what they call a first flush before, and it catches that first bit of water because there's probably dust on your roof, maybe birds have gone up and done their business there. You just want to make sure that the first little bit of water that comes off is caught. And I don't have any pictures. I would normally have a picture up there to show you what that would look like. You know, you should look through my book back there because there's a lot of great examples. And if you wanted to wait afterwards, I would love to, you know, if you're able to stay later, I could talk to you even longer. But there was kind of a lot of layers to your question about how to filter it, how to store it, if it comes from the roof, if it comes from the ground, what kind of water issues, water rights might exist in terms of tapping that groundwater. There's many layers to that question that are somewhat site-specific. But overall, most of those could be resolved through a really fun workshop. There's lots of workshops that are happening all over our community and that sometimes I'm involved in, lots of other people are involved in. And so I would check out Grow down in Tam Junction, often have seasonal workshops, and you know, maybe it's time that I put another one on too, because I actually haven't seen one exactly happening right now, but just talking about some of those things, because there's a lot of questions there. Most of those questions are resolved in my book, but specifically for your property, you could also tap into the you know, Marin Municipal Water District.